just enough space to sit down. Yeah.
I'm going to move your candle. Just don't want you.
If I catch fire, it's just pyrotechnics. Yeah.
I'm already on fire.
Creatively or figuratively.
I've been on fire for 30 years, mate.
Okay, so Kevin. Well, most of us kind of got to music and ended up playing music. You ended up being a photographer. So how was that start?
I studied photography.
Yeah, I mean, why did you study photography?
Well, that's something I was always interested in. My father and my grandfather were keen amateur photographers, and they both had dark rooms. So they bought me a camera when I was 5 and taught me how to print. And so it was something that I just did as a hobby, really. And then when I was about to go to university, I was going out with a girl that summer whose brother said to me, "Why are you wasting your time studying English when you should be going to art school?" So I took his advice, and luckily that was it. And the timing was perfect, really, because when I graduated, punk was just happening in Manchester. So I was there, and I was able to shoot that and document it, and kind of carried on from that, really. It was once I photographed joy of it. I mean, I just photographed my contemporaries and photographed everything that was happening in the city.
Okay, can I just backtrack a little bit, because the first shot, and I think it was in here, but I missed the first 20 seconds, is that fantastic picture of Bowie playing in Manchester on the Ziggy Tour 73, and you're not a trained photographer there, but that stands up to the rest of the shots there. I mean, at that point in time, did you think, actually, I'm quite good at this?
Yeah, I went to see Bowie do on the Ziggy Tour, and I took a camera in because I was a massive Bowie fan. I was really excited by going to see it, and then I was stood in the wrong place, really, for a shot that I thought looked really good. So I went to Leeds 2 weeks later and took the picture with his arms outstretched. I just stood in the right position for it. And then you don't really know if you've got the right shot when you're shooting on film. But when I processed it and looked at it, I thought it looked great. And then I was 19, and the V&A, Victoria and Albert Museum in London, bought that picture from me for their permanent collection. So I thought, you always have moments where you think, right, I've made it now, what's going to happen next? Are people going to throw loads of money at me? Am I going to go on tour with Bowie or what? But that doesn't really happen. And then, just to talk about Bowie for a minute, the first time I actually did a proper session with him was when he was doing that terrible tin machine project. And we went to Dublin to do a piece for the NME. And I was really nervous. I was really hamstrung by the idea that I was photographing my teenage idol. And Bowie turned up in this terrible jacket. And normally if it's a contemporary, you just say to him, "Look, mate, can you put a black t-shirt on, or can you do something?" But I couldn't tell Bowie to change his clothes. He was probably designed by somebody who was closer to him than me. And I was taking all these photographs, and I was getting more and more depressed and thinking, I can't even use these. I can't tell him to change his jacket. And I took about normally I take 2 rolls of film, and I took about 10 rolls of film, thinking I may as well throw these all in the bin now. And I was so upset and so depressed by this. And then I said to him, because I was a fan, I said, "Can I come and watch you rehearse for a bit?" And he said, "Yeah, of course." And I went in the rehearsal room, and he was just stood there with a cigarette in his mouth, and I took that silhouette shot that you saw at the beginning. And then I watched them rehearse for a bit as a fan, and then he sat on the edge of the drum riser for a bit and had a cigarette, and I thought, that's great, that works really well, that'll make a really good cover shot for the paper. And I took a picture, and I wasn't really sure whether I should take pictures or not. And he heard the camera click, and he looked over at me and raised an eyebrow, and I took another shot, and then I knew I'd got the picture I wanted. And we we'd said we'd put Tin Machine on the cover of the NME, and obviously we just put Bowie on the cover. And the PR went mad, and we had the usual huge argument. And my editor said, Tin Machine are on the cover, and he said, no, that's just Bowie. And he said, no, have a look at the photo caption. And the photo caption said, David Bowie, brackets, out of Tin Machine, not pictured. Photo by Kevin Cummins. And he said, we didn't say we put a picture of them on.
So you got that first Bowie shot, and you know you got the eye for the shots, but at that time, it's very different. And I mean, in Manchester, there's of course there's photographers up there because it's a small music business, but the idea of being a rock photographer is a long way away, isn't it? So we go back where you talked about before, that you graduated and the punk thing started in Manchester, and it's a case, in one level it's the right place at the right time, but there's a lot of quite talented people, a small talented scene there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a question you often get from someone in the audience. They say, well, you were in the right place at the right time. And I said, there were 2 million other people there as well who didn't do what I did. And you had to be quite dedicated because we were working for a London newspaper. And back in those days, in 1976, 77, it was very difficult. Most people in London didn't go anywhere else. They had no interest in going anywhere north. They'd go south, they'd come to Europe, but the north was another country, and they had no idea what went on up there. So I was there with Paul Morley, and we quite often would just make things up. We invented a band that we were in, we did loads of stuff like that, and we just used to send a photo and a press release every week, and they'd just print it because they couldn't be bothered coming up to find out if any of it was true. And then when Howard Devoto left Buzzcocks, we wanted to put Howard in the paper, and Paul wrote this piece about how Howard was currently writing, putting the words of Samuel Beckett to music, and the NME thought, great, and we got a whole page out of this with a picture of Howard looking suitably enigmatic, and we were just making it up and having a great time. And then, then one of their journalists came up to see what was happening, and we kind of had to say, well, actually, there isn't anything happening. Half these bands don't exist.
But is that the point in time when you kind of contrived that there was this post-punk scene in Manchester, and you had to do it, there's going to be double page spread, and Joy Division was one of the 4 bands in the piece? Is that how that came about?
Yeah, it was really, because we were saying there's loads going on in Manchester, and at the time, once Buzzcocks had fizzled out, there wasn't really much happening. And Joy Division was still struggling. They weren't very popular, they weren't the band that everybody adores today. And we were commissioned again. Normally you get commissioned to do a single band feature, but with a London music paper, their idea of the regions was, right, we'll just do 4 bands in a feature and then don't bother us for a year, So we were asked to do these 4 bands. Well, I think we did 3 in the end. We did Joy Division, Spherical Objects, and The Passage. And Paul Morley was convinced that Spherical Objects were going to be the biggest band to come out of Manchester at that time. And I shot loads of pictures of them. We did The Passage, and then the last one we did was Joy Division. And we'd had really bad weather that week. You're used to it, but we don't get much snow, and we'd had terrible weather. And I said to my editor, it's been snowing in Manchester, it'll really date the pictures if we use pictures of them in the snow in 2 weeks' time. So shall we just cancel it? And he said, do a few pictures in the snow, but do most of the shoots indoors. So that's what we did. And they insisted on the pictures being taken on a Saturday. And normally I'd go and see Manchester City on a Saturday. But because of the bad weather, our game was postponed, so I was able to do that shoot. So it might never have happened.
But with that shoot, it's quite interesting. There's all different ways you can work with a band as a photographer, isn't there? Sometimes it really is just people with their hands in their pockets looking a bit bored. Yeah. Sometimes somebody has an idea what they want to look like. Well, the Joy Division is both, isn't it? You've got Ian Curtis, who definitely had a vision of what that band was about. 3 other blokes who thought it was all a bit of a laugh. Yeah.
A little bit like that, yeah, and also because I could only afford to buy 2 rolls of film, I had to make every shot count. I couldn't waste film, and I'd always had this idea that I wanted Joy Division to look like serious young men. And they weren't serious at all. But I needed them to look serious for the photos because we wanted to present an image of them that was incredibly serious and art school. And, you know, everybody thinks Ian was this tortured soul who would read Dostoevsky on the back of the bus. But, you know, actually he was a 22-year-old boy who just liked girls and football and drinking, you know. Sorry to puncture out that. No, but, you know, I mean, obviously he wrote great lyrics, but he wrote great lyrics in the way that a lot of adolescents write poetry in their bedroom as well. And the band didn't really listen to what Ian was writing. To them it was just another level of sound. It was only after Ian died that they listened to their own music and thought, fucking hell, I wish we'd listened to this earlier. You know, we could have stopped it. But obviously, you know, I mean, you know, that's not quite the case.
I remember you telling me in that folk session.
That's the jacket Bowie wore.
That is an awkward moment, isn't it? But that Joy Division thing, I remember you telling me that well, you always speak to a band about the shot they want, and you said, what kind of shot you look for? They talk about they just want to be stood at a bus stop or something.
Yeah, you always ask a band what they want, just to break the ice and have a chat with them. And they said, we'd like to queue up at a bus stop. And because they felt they were ordinary and they wanted to do very ordinary things on it, and so I had to do 2 pictures of them at a bus stop and then make a few suggestions. But the reason that shot on the bridge came about was, originally the idea was we were going to take a picture of them looking south to London, because everybody just wanted to move to London anyway. Nobody wanted to stay in their hometown. And it was semi-aspirational. But as they were stood on the brow of the bridge, I just thought it made an interesting architectural shot more than anything. And so I took a couple of frames of it, thinking nobody would ever use it. But then when I looked at the film, I thought there was a lot of space and it was incredibly bleak, and everybody thought we'd been to Poznan or Leipzig to take the photograph. I had no idea it was certainly in Manchester. And I thought even then it defined their sound. I thought, you know, you have to remember there was no easy way of listening to music if you lived outside of England. If you wanted to know what an English band were like, you know, you'd have to write to a record store in the UK and try and buy something, and you'd buy the NME 3 weeks behind. And when we used that picture, it intrigued people enough to think, I'm interested in that band because it looks so sparse, it looks so bleak, I want to know what their music's like.
I mean, you obviously already heard them, so was there a sense, you know, you say you asked the band what they want, but did you have an idea of how you wanted to frame the band? You know, you thought this is how the picture's going to help define the music. Were you thinking those kind of terms, taking that shot?
Yeah, definitely. I think I always felt that was a responsibility I had, because I think when you take photographs, you're helping to build the mythology of the band. And I don't want pictures of Ian Curtis pissing in an ashtray or lighting his own farts. I want a picture of him where he looks like a beautiful, absolutely beautiful young boy who people want to put on their bedroom walls. That's what the mythology, and that's the problem these days, where bands offer you too much information. You know, they take pictures of themselves going on stage, they take pictures of themselves hanging around the dressing room, they take pictures of themselves all the time, and there's no mythology anymore. Whereas then we could help to build the mythology of a band. And when I was growing up, I didn't want, you know, if Instagram had been around, I would not have wanted David Bowie to Instagram his breakfast. I wanted to think David Bowie lived in a spaceship and ate moon dust, you know, and as far as I knew, he did, because he didn't send me pictures of himself every day.
And then he wore that jacket.
Yeah, so it's
Just one final thing about that icon. It is the iconic Joy Division session, and it's the picture that really does define the Trevor. But it's that great photo of Ian, which I think it's on here, just staring at the camera and his eyes, you know, the eyes and the black holes on it. It's an incredible shot. And when you look at it, it does look like a dark, poetic shot, but in the background, the rest of the band are all trying to put him off.
Yeah, the rest of the band are stood next to me, trying to make him laugh. And I had to keep saying to him, zone out, don't look at them, don't do anything. And the light was dropping, it was getting quite dark. And I had about 6 frames left to shoot. And I didn't want him to laugh, I didn't need him to laugh. I mean, obviously, in retrospect, I wish I had a few pictures like that. But then I wouldn't have printed one. I wanted him to look like he looked, a slightly ethereal, really deep songwriter, poet, musician, you know, in the style of Jim Morrison and people who, and Iggy, and people that they were really obsessed with at the time.
So in this kind of period, obviously, it's the punk and the post-punk period, and it's great for a photographer because there is people have a really sense of what they look like and how they want to portray themselves. And earlier on in this little series of photographs, it's a really great shots punk period, like Susie's in there, Harriet from the Slits. And actually probably my favourite photograph of John Ryder, Johnny Rotten, is that's at the Huddersfield gig, a Christmas gig, isn't it? The last gig they played as a proper Sex Pistols.
Yeah, last Sex Pistols gig with Sid was in England was Christmas Day '77, and again, you know, the idea of actually in England of leaving your house on Christmas Day upset your parents so much. My parents wouldn't speak to me for a month after I went to see the Pistols on Christmas Day. And Malcolm McLaren, who I knew quite well because he was really obsessed with buzzcocks, just let me stand side stage to take the pictures. And I got a really great set of pictures out of it. And then the music press didn't publish for a week over the New Year, and by the time they were publishing, they'd already split up in America because it had all gone wrong. And so I had the last pictures of them in the UK, and they got used a lot. And again, you know, it was just an amazing gig, the idea that anyone would do anything. I mean, now it doesn't seem outrageous, but then I can assure you, the idea of playing a gig on Christmas Day was so subversive.
Yeah, you couldn't get there. I don't even know how the audience managed to get to the gig.
No, and the ticket just had question marks on it and a phone number to ring on Christmas Eve. You had no idea where you were going to go.
And in that period, sort of percolating out of that, so just a year later, the Joy Division things coming through, and just managed to start to get a sense of what it's about there. I mean, at that time, maybe because of your photographs as well, but people used to have this idea that Manchester was this really dark, foreboding, sort of terrifying place. And Joy Division was quite part of that deal, wasn't it? Really?
I think so. I mean, the London Music Press, when journalists from London would first come up to Manchester to write about the bands, and we felt very protective because, you know, Paul Morley and I we felt we'd invented half of it. So when the journalists came up, they were terrified because they thought, what's going on in Manchester is really dark, it's quite secret. And they'd get me to meet them at the train station, so I'd introduce them to the band because they said, we're really scared of meeting Joy Division, we've no idea what they're going to be like.
Yeah, maybe that was Hookie's fault, I don't know. So what point did you move to London? It's a few years after that, wasn't it?
I moved to London in '87.
Yeah.
Just as all the Acid House, Happy Mondays, Stone Roses thing was happening. So I'd just go back, and they said, why have you moved? Because we've now got no one in Manchester to take these pictures. So I had to go back to Manchester every week and start keeping on building the archive and keeping on photographing the bands.
So then backtracking slightly again, so we go back to sort of the next key figure, sort of cultural thing that comes out of Manchester is Morrissey and the Smiths. And you worked with Morrissey a lot of times. And we talked about this before, but he certainly has a really strong idea of image and identity, isn't he?
Yeah, like I said, most musicians don't really know how they want to be photographed except quickly. Whereas Morrissey wants to get his money's worth. So Morrissey will set you an alarm call for 6 o'clock in the morning, and you photograph him until it's too dark to take pictures.
So the first time you worked with him, what was that like? Was it the same kind of thing? Was he already trying to control the situation, or just throwing loads of ideas around?
No, in fact, when I did the pictures of them in the park, he didn't really have any ideas, and they were quite a young band then. And so it's interesting when you ask a band to line up for a picture, and then you have to start moving them around. Most of them just stand shoulder to shoulder, and so then you've got to move them into position and try and make some shape of the shot. And with the Smiths, I thought urban decay didn't really suit what I wanted to do with them, and I took them to a park near Manchester. We did all the photographs by this fountain, and I said to them, can you just sit around the fountain, thinking they'd spread themselves out. And they sat next to each other in exactly the way they lined up on stage. So then I had to move them around. And Morrissey, when you're photographing 4 people, you can only look at 2 or 3 of them and hope the other 1 or 2 is doing the right thing. And obviously, Morrissey was the one who would always make sure the camera was on him. And that continues to this day.
It's interesting you talk about that because it shows there's so much more to taking a photograph than just taking a photograph, isn't it? It's like, when we talk about arranging a band, I mean, it's the right kind of positions. That's not something you can't order people around because it pisses them off. So is it like...
I don't mind that. I mean, I think that's my job, and also I'd shoot with quite a wide angle lens, so I'd be very close to them. And I normally apologise in advance, but I say, I'm going to touch you and pull you into the shape, because it's easier than saying to them, can you just step back 2 steps and can you look to the right? It's much easier to just get hold of their face and do that with it, and put them where you want them, So I do manhandle my bands.
Do you have to sort
It's got me into some terrible scrapes, actually.
Yeah, like who?
Not telling you.
Well, no one's going to mention it.
When you look at the pictures, actually.
Not the fall.
No.
So when you do more sessions with Morrissey and the Smiths, and he's getting more confident to get, so he's turning with ideas. How does that work? Does he start to try and control the shots, and do you have to very subtly, or do you work together? Do you kind of say?
No, it's very collaborative. Morrissey turns up and he's got about 20 ideas for a picture, and you think 19 of them are terrible. So you can say to him, well, we'll try that one, and then that kind of draws, not just Morrissey, but with anybody, that draws them in, and they're really happy that you've tried the shot that they've been thinking of in their spare time. And then you say, how about if we do this now? And then you get the picture you want eventually. And sometimes it's okay when you're working with your own peer group. I think, and your own contemporaries, that's fine. It's when you work with somebody you idolise, and it's kind of difficult to do that, I think, a little bit, because you're a little bit in awe of them. But you've got to put that out of your mind sometimes and just think, right, I'm here to get a picture, I'm going to do that. And, the worst thing you can do when you work with any musician, or anybody really, is put yourself in a subservient position by going up to them and asking for an autograph. It kind of upsets the balance. But it's quite interesting, since I've been doing a range of books. I get, there's a band in England, Savages, girl band, who, when I photographed them about 18 months ago, oddly for a German magazine actually, for Specs, they all turned up with their Joy Division books for me to sign. So it kind of gives, so it gives you it's a good working position, that, because then you are
because you're the boss.
Yeah, you're in charge right from the start. And I don't know, I think I photographed Liza Minnelli once, and I was absolutely in awe of Liza Minnelli, and it was part of a press junket where she would do an interview, photograph in about 4 hours in a hotel room. And I thought, I've got to get a different kind of picture of her to the others. And I don't know if any of you are journalists, but if you go on a press junket, it's a massive dick-waving competition. And everybody turns, so the first photographer turns up with a fucking furniture van full of assistants and equipment to do a 5-minute picture with somebody. And I turn up and I've got a camera and a lens in a shopping bag, And I think I've got to get her on side. And as a fan, I thought, what will get her on side? And knowing what she was like, I took, and she's quite fragile, as we know. I took an original copy of Cabaret on vinyl for her to sign, and she was so thrilled, and she was stroking it almost, and she signed it to me, put a big smiley on the cover, and then she'd do anything I wanted. And I just got these lovely pictures of her where I was standing on a table in front of her and getting her to look up at the camera, and got these beautiful doe-eyed pictures of her that in the end were the pictures that everybody used, rather than all the ones with the people who turned up with fucking furniture vans and a train full of equipment.
So you broke your own rule. So it's quite a lot of line shots. I mean, obviously that's a very different kind of discipline. Or is it, for you, is it the same kind of thing? Or is it, because you're trying to capture a very random moment of a live shot, aren't you?
With a live shot, it's really difficult because these days there's lots of photographers taking live pictures, and you're only allowed to do 2 or 3 numbers, and there's no point in shooting a band if you can only shoot them in the first 2 or 3 numbers before they've even warmed up. So I would never shoot a band unless I could shoot the whole show. And I was in Rome with Morrissey about 6 years ago, and he was being deliberately awkward with everybody, and some poor woman photographer had driven from Milan to Rome 6 hours and was told by Morrissey's tour manager, you've got 20 seconds of the second number. Well, if you've got no respect for the people who are taking pictures, then don't take them. I just walk off a shoot like that. I just refuse to be treated like that.
I mean, so like the Joy Division shots, the live shots there, would you have the whole gig in those days?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've always shot a whole gig, or else I've never shot a band.
So if you have the ideal situation when you've got the whole gig to take a live shot, and I'm just kind of interested in that, does your mentality to taking a shot change? It's almost, obviously in those days you just couldn't take like a digital camera, hundreds of shots and pick up the best ones. But how do you wait for the moment? Because you don't know when the moment's going to arrive, do you?
I think if you're interested in rock and roll, you know when the right moment's going to arrive, because you can anticipate what somebody's going to do on stage, and you can also make sure you're in the right position to take that picture. So you don't just turn up and say, right, well, who are you, mate, and where do you stand? You could research them, you could look at other photographs. Now you can look at YouTube, you can do anything, and put yourself in exactly the right spot to get the pictures you want. You don't want somebody, you don't want to be on the wrong side. If they hold a mic in that hand, you don't want to be over there taking the picture. So there's lots of things to consider when you're doing a live shot. Just make sure you're in a position where you're going to get a better picture than anyone else. And seeing as everyone in the world takes pictures at gigs these days, pointlessly, stand in the right place and take one.
Yeah, so it's actually to get something that's, you would think was quite random, it actually takes a lot of preparation. So the photographs which you added in late on to this little series of pictures is those fantastic birthday party shots. And I've always loved those pictures. To me, it's the best pictures of the birthday party as well. Because that was a band that had very strong personalities in it, and you pulled out all those separate personalities.
5 very strong personalities, all pulling in different directions.
Which is what made them musically so brilliant.
That's why they were great.
Yeah.
And I had this idea. I thought, and there's part of this is me thinking, because we used to get paid by the picture at the NME, I thought if there's a way of shooting a band and getting them to use 5 pictures, I'm going to get paid 5 times. So I thought, like the New Order pictures with the silhouette and one lit in the foreground, with the birthday party, I got them to line up and just turn round one at a time to take their picture, and the rest of them would have their back to the camera. But of course, they all did that, and then when it was Nick's turn, rather than doing that, he just walked out and stood in front of the rest of them so you couldn't see him in typical lead singer fashion, which said a lot about his relationship with Roland.
Yeah, which is another reason you did this as well. I wanted to underline Roland Howard as well. It's been an important member.
Yeah, I mean, Roland was probably the most gifted one in the band, I thought. And I don't know if you've seen the documentary about Roland Hart, but it's beautiful. And every single woman interviewed in it is madly in love with him still. And he had, it was a very tragic story, but no one will say a bad word with him. And then they interview Nick, and Nick's obviously thinking, this is a Roland doco, so I've actually got to be nice to him. And you can see Nick finding it really difficult to find the words.
Which is like probably most of the bands you've worked with, that kind of tension appears in the end of it.
Well, there always is, I've worked with the Gallaghers, who then stopped speaking to each other, Morrissey Marr, who stopped speaking to each other, Peter Hook and Bernard Sumner, who stopped speaking to each other. And I never take sides in their arguments. It's not my argument, and the reason I managed to keep working with these people is because I can step back, I can have my own opinion about it, but I'm not going to get involved in a family argument. It's like stepping in between your friend's wife and your mate and trying to sort it out for them. Nobody will ever thank you for it. Can we talk about my, can we have a hooky story?
Well, there's a lot of hooky stories.
Yeah. Well, Peter Hook he's got a very odd idea of copyright, Peter, and he doesn't really understand why he doesn't get paid when my photograph appears in the music press. And he says, I stood on that bridge for you and I should earn some money from it. And I said, it's like when I listen to one of your records, I've wasted 5 minutes of my life and you're getting paid for it. So we get on very well actually, but we did a talk together, a music industry talk to industry lawyers. And I don't know if you can see this, but I had this made, which is
the Joy Division. It's a Joy Division bridge in Cube. Yeah.
It's a credit card with the Joy Division picture on the bridge on it. And at the time in England, if you had a NatWest credit card, you could pay £10 and have your own picture put on it. And most people have a picture of their dog or their children or something. And I thought I'd have that on it. And I was doing this event with Hooky, and I said to him, have you seen these? And he went white. And I said, I got £30,000 off MasterCard for that. And he didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. And I didn't hear from him for ages, and then when I was doing my Manchester book, I wanted him to do an interview in it because I was doing Johnny Marr, Mark E. Smith, and I wanted Hooky to do a piece for it. And he said, "I'll do it on one condition." I said, "What's that?" He said, "You answer 3 questions." And I said, "Go on then, what are they?" And he said, by then he'd completely forgotten all the figures, so they were massively exaggerated. And he said, "Did you get £30,000 from Warner Brothers for the Best of Joy Division sleeve," which was the same shot? And I said, "No, my agent's got £4,000 for it and went bust before they paid me, so I got nothing for it." And he said, "Did you get £100,000 from MasterCard for that credit card?" And I said, "No, I paid £10 for it." I said, "And it's the best fucking £10 I've ever spent in my life because you've been upset about it for 2 years." And I said to him, "So I'm 10 quid down so far." So I said, "What's the 3rd question?" And he said, "Oh, it doesn't matter."
So do you find it easy to work with men or women, or does it make any difference?
Makes no difference.
Makes a difference.
As long as you don't try and get off with that. I mean, people say that all the time. I mean, I did a talk at Latitude, and everyone was really drunk. And the first question someone from the audience was, "Has anyone tried to come on to you when you've been taking their picture?"
That's because they're watching 1960s photography films when it was a bit more glamorous, I guess.
But I'm not going to kiss and tell. Not here. I'll do it in my book.
Oh, so you have?
Haven't we all, John?
It's never like that post-punk. Boring. So,
Yeah.
so it's because there's two pictures in here quite got little interesting sort of stories attached to them as well. There's that really fantastic picture of Linda from Ludus, who's like Morris. I would say it's Morrissey's muse, really influential Morrissey, like a tampon in her mouth. And the picture of PJ Harvey with her arms not underneath her arms not shaved. You know, to anybody from our world, fantastic shots. You think they're like works of art, but in the world of the media and the NME, they cause problems.
Really difficult to use. The picture of Linda pulling the tampon out of her mouth, they wouldn't use. They thought it was disgusting. And you've got to remember, a lot of music writers are very repressed boys. There weren't many female music writers. And when I presented them with that picture, I gave them no others. I just gave them one picture of Linda pulling the tampon out of her mouth. They refused to use it. And similarly, when I did the pictures of PJ Harvey, the idea of the shoot with PJ Harvey with her top off was she said to me that she felt her lyrics stripped her bare, and she wanted to do a literal representation of that, and she wanted to be photographed naked. And I said, we won't use pictures of you naked, but we can probably work a way around it and do you topless and shoot it from the back, but we won't do anything else. So that was the compromise. And she insisted on doing the pictures with her arms up, with unshaved armpits. And when I brought those into the office, every single person in the office said, fucking hell, that's disgusting. It's like they've never seen a woman, you know. And then they used the back shots, and everybody at Melody Maker, who were our close rival but also published by the same company, had a go at me and said, you're exploiting her. I said, how am I exploiting her? And then, we tried to explain the concept behind the picture. She was in charge of those shots, not me. I was taking what she wanted to do. It's not like a picture of the bloody Playboy or something.
It's a really powerful shot.
It's a really powerful image, but the major problem was the male writers on the paper who just couldn't cope with the fact that women actually had body hair.
So, and this time, like music scene's changing, and the people who are taking photographs. We're moving out the post-punk kind of period. It's just before PJ Harvey, of course, and Manchester's changing as well. And you start to work at bands like Happy Mondays and the Stone Roses, and that kind of next kind of generation of bands. And is it a different kind of way of working? Are these bands? Because the original image, everything's very stark, very kind of post-punk, and Manchester, like you say, looks like Poland, or how we imagine Poland to look like at the time. But the next kind of phase of Manchester is kind of suddenly goes into colour. Is that something that you consider, as a photographer as well, or is it just?
I thought it was really important to photograph Stone Roses and Happy Mondays in colour, because the drugs they were taking were technicolor drugs. They were taking ecstasy and acid. And it was very different from all the speed-driven stuff that was happening earlier. And so I started to think about shooting colour and making it work in colour. And also, the bands were different. The bands were like gangs, really. They were bunches of friends, rather than people, obviously they were friends earlier, but these were like large groups with a dancer. And it was a very different feel. The whole thing was incredibly different then. And when I first started working with Happy Mondays, Tony Wilson introduced me to them, and he said, I think you'll all get on, come and meet them. And so Sean was really belligerent, and Tony was Tony Wilson was a very expansive, very generous person, and Tony was saying, this is Kevin, he's worked with Ian Curtis, he's worked with Mark Bolan, he's photographed, I can't remember who else, but the Sex Pistols, and Sean just said to him, they're all dead. and I thought, this isn't going to go very well. And I said to, and again, I just said to Sean, so how do you see yourself? How would you like to be photographed? And he said, we'd like to be photographed with Rambo. And Tony misheard it, thought he said Rimbaud, French philosopher, poet. And Tony was saying, well, I didn't realise you were into French philosophy, Sean. And talking about all that, and Sean said, fucking Sylvester Stallone, you Dr. Con. And I said, so that's going to cost you a few bob, isn't it, Tony? And Sean said, just looked at us like we were mad, And he said, there's a poster of Rocky outside, or of Rambo outside the Hacienda. Let's just go and stand in front of that. And that's what we did for the first shot. They just sat on the edge of this bridge with Rambo in the background, and it was very unfactory, because everything else had been really uber cool before that. And then suddenly they want their picture taken in front of a blockbuster movie poster.
Do you think that was always conscious, like trying to break from the past? Or was
No,
it just
not
the way
at
they
all.
were?
I think that's just exactly the way they were.
Yeah.
They had no pretensions at all. When we first went to New York, they went on a 3-day trip on visitors' visas and hired equipment and played a flash gig there. The first thing they did was go to 42nd Street and try and buy crack cocaine. And Bez met this bloke in the shop doorway who told him where he could do it, and he went in a car with this absolute stranger and stayed in his house for 36 hours. No one knew where he'd gone. Sean went in a liquor store and was drinking, bought a bottle of beer, him and Bez stood on the street deciding whether to go up to Harlem to buy their crack cocaine. And the police turned up, grabbed the pair of them and said, you can't drink on the street. And Bez said, I fucking drink where I want. And before he'd even finished the sentence, they smacked his face into the bonnet of the car and they were handcuffing him. And I said, we've been in New York for about 25 minutes. And in the end, I said, look, they're English, we explained the whole thing, and in the end they kind of calmed down a bit. And they told Sean if he wanted to drink on the street, he had to drink in it out of the brown paper bag. No problem, you can do that. I went back to New York about 4 years later with Happy Mondays, and Sean went into a shop and bought a Perrier water and drank it out of a brown paper bag. And he thought they meant you couldn't drink anything at all on the street. There's a picture of him there on 42nd Street with neon exotic and so on, and sex shop behind him, and he's got a Perrier water in a brown paper bag.
Because you're working in colour for those bands, it kind of dictates the shot more. You can't. With black and white, you sort of get away with taking obviously a great shot, but with colour, you have to sort of add things to it. Like the manic shots there, we got like Richie or the little Marilyn Rose of it, and of course the famous Stone Roses shot in the paint as well. Are you thinking outside? It's almost become like a painting instead of a photograph, those kind of shots?
Sometimes, but also I use colour in a very monochromatic way. But I think sometimes you can do something where you make the colour work for the image. So, for instance, when I shot Stone Roses in paint, they're Manchester United fans, so I painted them in sky blue, which is Manchester City's colours. And it's little things like that I can enjoy, where I'm getting one over on them slightly. And I'd always had this idea of painting the band as a John Squire painting, and I thought, let's try it and see if it works. It could have been disastrous. And they really liked the idea. And the only place they would do it was Manchester on a Sunday, and there was nowhere we could get. In the end, I pleaded with a fashion photographer to let me use his studio. And his studio was so sparse, it was really beautiful. He had nothing out in it at all apart from 2 pencils that were 2 centimetres apart. And that was it. And I thought, I daren't tell you what I'm going to do with your studio. And I had to build a polythene cube in his studio to make sure the paint didn't go anywhere. And he just gave me the keys and said, leave them on the table, see you Monday. And the band lay in position, and we worked out the shot we wanted. And he said, and I thought John would just paint them. I actually thought he would get a paintbrush out and paint them. And he opened a gallon tin of paint and just threw it across the room over them, and then continued to add that to it, and then poured a tin of paint over his head, and got in the shot. And from then on, we just added strips of colour and lines, and he had this spray nozzle thing that kept firing in the air and putting colour onto it. And we built this up over 2 hours in a studio with no heating in November. And once we started painting them, they couldn't move. The only person who could move was John, because he was in the background, and he kept getting up and painting them. So after the 2 hours, it was so cold and miserable. They stood against the plastic backdrop and threw paint everywhere and just did a final shot like that. And then obviously wanted to get showered. And I had to tell them that because they'd insisted on it being a Sunday, there were no showers open in the studio. Everywhere was locked up. And they just looked at me and thought, well, how are we going to get home? They had to go home in Ian's van, covered head to toe in paint, and then bath each other, I assume. I actually wish I was there. I didn't see that bit. But Manny said for about 6 months he had all 4 pairs of jeans stood up in his hall, which would have actually probably been a better picture. I don't know.
And the Manic shots as well, quite important for the time as well. You know, was that, and like Richie from the Manics, the guitar player who disappeared, probably died 20 years ago now, more than 20 years. Was he like Morrissey to work with? Was he somebody who had a real idea, a sense of what he wanted to convey with the photographs?
No,
you had to work with him?
No, he didn't.
So it's all you to them, was it?
Yeah.
That way around?
Everything I did with the Manics was me building them up into something else. And the first shoot we did with the Manics was on the gold cloth. And to them, they really understand their rock history. And it was really important to them to get their first NME cover. And I wanted them to just look really trashy. And we used gold sari cloth because where I live in London is quite a strong Asian area. So I could get sari material really easily. So I used to use it on a lot of shoots. And I got this gold sari cloth, and the night before the shoot, they went to a nightclub in London and just went up to girls in the club and said, "Can you bite me and bruise me? Can you give me a love bite?" And to make them look even trashier. And then I wrote "Culture Slut" on Nikki, and not to be outdone, Richie was in the dressing room with a school compass carving HIV into his neck, but because he was doing it in the mirror, he put VIH. He did it the wrong way around, which was fortunate really, because I don't think we would have put somebody with HIV scratched into their neck on the cover of the paper, but no one knew what VIH meant.
I mean, at that point in time, maybe from the start, I mean, would you say, when you take a photograph of a band and you say it's create the mystique as well, is there an element of documentation what the band is, or are you trying to create something that is like a painting? You know, that's
There's a bit of both.
Yeah.
There's 2 different ways, because if you're going on tour with a band, you want to document what's happening. But if you're trying to create a pin-up and a specific moment like that, then you want a picture that people are going to put on their bedroom walls. You know, and that's what I think is really important. It doesn't matter how many pictures you've got in a gallery. I've had pictures all over the world in galleries, and all those galleries are teenage kids' bedroom walls. And I think that's great. That's a real testimony to the job we do. I think, you know, I love the idea that people constantly write to me and say, they do send me pictures of what their bedroom was like in 1990 and stuff like this. And it's quite humbling actually that people all over the world would have these pictures on their wall.
And do you think that's because, you know,
It's a great job.
well, apart from that, but you know, going back to the beginning, because you grew up with Bowie and that sense of theatre and that theatricality and that creating that sort of extended personality, and that's what you grew up with, the glam rock?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think, and also, you know, my family was very working class, but my mother's mother, my grandmother, was a nightclub singer, and so we had this kind of glamour in the family anyway. And she had a piano in the sitting room, and a tiny sitting room, like about a quarter the size of this, but with a piano in it. And so I grew up, and my mum always loved musical theatre and opera, so, and my dad loved photography, so I'm an amalgam of them, you know. And I do love that theatricality, and that's what I always try to get in the pictures.
Because it's weird, because part of the punk period which you grew up through was this idea to strip all that away as well, wasn't it? So I like that idea of the conflict. And
Well, in a way, yes, but also, and nobody gets on stage without an ego, as you know.
of course,
So
it's showing off, isn't it? Like
But
right
it's
now,
showing off,
yeah.
and nobody gets on stage unless they've got an ego, and they want to be seen. And so there's an element of theatricality with it all the time, and Polly Harvey really understood that. So when she would go on stage, she would be a different persona each time. You know, for each tour, she'd think about that. She didn't just go on in her jeans and a sweatshirt.
Even someone like Mark Smith would fit that as well, because he does kind of portray this idea that this is as it is, this is as I am, but he's kind of doing that as well, isn't he? It's
Of
great
course
to
it is,
see.
except
Yeah.
I'm Mark Smith. I don't know
Why do people always do that? Yeah.
I've worked with Mark a lot, and it's so exhausting working with Mark and Smith. And
You're not even in a band with it.
I know, I'm the only person in Manchester who's never been in the Fall.
Why exhausting?
Because he doesn't want to work, and he's always challenging you, he's always trying to make it difficult. And I was, not so long ago actually, it's maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I did a shoot with Marky Smith in Salford, just outside Manchester, which is where he's from. And I'd been told to get there and photograph him in the rehearsal rooms. And I got to the rehearsal rooms, which was in the middle of nowhere, and it was locked. And he didn't answer his mobile, because he doesn't answer his mobile. And because he pretends he doesn't have one. And I thought, I'll go to the nearest pub, and if he's not there, then I'll ring the record company. So I went to the nearest pub, and of course, they were all in there. This is like 3:30 in the afternoon. And we've had licensing laws in England where the pubs have been allowed to stay open all day for quite a long time. But in this pub, they still seemed to think the pub's closed at 3 and reopened at 5:30. And they had all the curtains drawn so nobody could see in. And they were sat in one room, and in the other room were the kind of villains who drink during the day in a working class area. And I took a picture of Mark with his pint, as I was saying to someone earlier, to add to all the pictures of Mark with the pint that I've got. And this guy saw me from the other room, and he came in, and he said to Mark E. Smith, "Why is he taking your picture?" And Mark said, "Because he fancies me." And the guy looked at him, and he said, and he saw the equipment around, and he said, "Are you a band?" And Mark went, "Aye." And the guy said, "Well, would I have heard of you?" And Mark said, "I don't fucking know." And it was a really difficult conversation, and this guy looked like he would slit his throat. And so he said, "Well, try me." He said, "What's your name?" And they just stared at each other for about 20 seconds, and Mark said, "The fucking Beatles." And the guy looked at him and he thought, "You are actually madder than I am, and I think I'm half nuts." And he said to Mark, I just thought, he's either going to punch him or something terrible's going to happen here. And he looked at Mark and he said, "Great name, mate." And he went back in the other room.
It's weird because you actually got a shot of Mark there when he was young, incredibly young. That's a long time ago.
That was part of the session we did when he was in the fucking Beatles.
What band is he in?
These are when, these are astonishing set pictures actually, where...
He actually ages during this session.
Yeah, it almost looks like a Francis Bacon painting, where his face is just falling apart.
And that's 10 years ago, probably.
It's not, it's about 4 years ago, though.
Looks a little older now. And I like this kind of session that you've got on this little screen here. I like all the Morrissey fan thing at the end, and that's kind of interesting as well, because for years you've taken photographs of bands, and that's kind of different, isn't it? That's like examining the fans and fandom. Was that a deliberate thing, or was it just because it's it's kind of a bizarre phenomenon. It's like it's just kind of interesting, that idea, the way the Mexicans kind of idolise Morrissey.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously none of these people would be anything without the fans. And when I was doing my Joy Division book, I photographed this tattoo, and I thought when I did the New Order one, I wanted the New Order one to finish it. And I've just kind of got sucked into this a little bit, and Morrissey fans particularly are really interesting because they all want lyrics. And so, not just There's a Light, which lots of people have, but I've maybe got 150 pictures now of different fans, and they get Morrissey tattooed on their arm, get Morrissey to sign their arm, and then get it tattooed straight away. And that's an interesting one because it's a quote from Sheila Delaney that Morrissey nicked for a song. So she's got Sheila Delaney and Morrissey quote, and he was quite tough, that bloke. And this guy had 28 different Morrissey tattoos. And again, Los Angeles, I think, is quite smart. But
true to you.
What were you trying to say? Is just documentation, just interested.
I'm interested in the way that fans want a piece of Morrissey or whoever, and they look like gangland tattoos, and they're Morrissey lyrics. You couldn't get anything further away from a gangland message, really.
Although he just plays that now, doesn't he?
But I photographed a girl in New York who just saw, actually, who had Ceremony tattooed on her arm last week, and I thought it was a fairly ordinary tattoo, but I thought I'll take a picture of it anyway. And she said it was her mother's favourite New Order track, and when her mother was dying, she asked her mum to write Ceremony in her handwriting, and then she had it tattooed on her arm as a permanent reminder. And I thought that was really lovely.
That's really powerful. Yeah. So speaking of New Order, is Barney in New Order the people you've taken the photographs of for the longest? It mustn't it? It must be 35 years of taking the pictures.
Pictures of Bernard and Stephen.
And how does that relationship kind of change over the
Mine
years?
and Bernard? Well, when I was talking to him for my book, and we were talking about various photographs, I just wanted to interview him about the photographs I'd taken. And is it really that boring? I wanted to talk to him about the photographs I'd taken, and we were talking about the picture on the bridge, and I said he agreed that was the picture that had come to define them. And I said, it was so bleak, it was so sparse, it told everybody what your music was like. And he said, we don't have any space in our music. I said, no, you do. And I said, musicians have a completely different idea what their music sounds like to the public. When they first made Unknown Pleasures, they wanted it to be a rock album. It was Martin Hannett who turned it into something different. And I said to Bernard, without my intervention, you would have been Bon Jovi. I've saved you from that by doing pictures like this. Hooky in leathers and a ponytail, and Bernard wearing school uniform on the same stage was quite a bizarre period.
What would he have said? So has the relationship changed when we go to take the picture? It's kind of interesting that, like the first time they'd all be snickering behind your back, but when it comes to the 48th session with them,
so exactly the same.
Just
exactly
snaps
the
back
same.
Just what it was.
It's like when you go home to your parents and you revert to being a 15-year-old and you want your mum to bring you your tea in the morning. It's like that when I photograph Bernard or any of New Order, they just revert back to what they were like when they were 20, and they just continue to take the piss.
Yeah. So who's the person you'd like to take the photograph of the most? I mean, who's, not most pleasurable, but the one that you always thought you got the greatest pictures of?
Morrissey.
Is it Morrissey? Yeah.
I think Morrissey gives you more in a picture, and he's a challenge, and he's very collaborative as well. I mean, obviously the pictures of Ian have become something else over the years, but I'd say Morrissey is still the best person to work with, because he's very mischievous, and he flirts a lot through the camera. And what I get, and the interesting thing about portraiture is a lot of photographers will take a picture of a person where they get them to just look at the camera. But the important thing is to get them to look beyond the camera lens so that they're looking at you, because that's when the eyes start to work on a photograph. If they're standing in front and they're just looking at the lens, they're bored. And you've got to get, and Morrissey understands that, and Morrissey projects right through the camera, and that's why I think they work best.
Who's the hardest person to work with? Is it Morrissey, or is there something? I mean, is there a nightmare session in there?
No, not really. I mean, you know, the worst people I've ever worked with in my life are Duran. It's a kind of boring long story, but they have no respect for each other, and they have no respect for us. And we went to New York for a day with one overnight, and we ended up being there for 8 days because they would never do anything we wanted. And it got to the stage where, and this is in the age of mobile phones. This is like, you know, not when you had to send a telegram to get hold of somebody. And Simon Le Bon, we met. We went to see him at Radio City Music Hall, and I fell asleep. Which, you know, I was tired. I had jet lag, and the next day we were supposed to meet the band and then go home that night. And we met the manager in our hotel lobby, and he said, "Simon doesn't want to leave his room today." And I said, "Why don't you ask him if he'll come down to the hotel lobby to have his picture taken, and then we can go home?" And he said, "Great idea, I'll fax him. He'll get back to us in 24 hours. And Murray, who was the PR, said, "Ring him. Simon won't do the telephone." So we had to fax him and stay an extra day. And exactly 24 hours later, to the minute, we got a message that said, "I am not leaving my hotel room today." So I said, "Why don't I photograph him in bed?" And his manager said, "Great idea, I'll fax him. He'll get back to us in 24 hours. And I said, again, so we had to stay another day, reconvene in the hotel lobby 24 hours later, and we got a message saying, no. So the manager was then getting a bit irritated by his band's behaviour. They were all staying in different hotels because they all hate each other. And he said, "Come and see the show again tonight," which was like my worst nightmare, actually. But we had to go and see the show again. And I did some pictures of them in the dressing room before they went on stage, all having their hair teased by their girlfriends or wives, individual shots. And then we met them after the show, and Ellen von Unsworth was there, who was going to make a video with them. And the manager said to us, "Look, I know we've pissed you around a lot, so why don't you stay for the weekend, and we'll let you on the video set, and you can do lots of shots, you can hang out with the lads, they'll have loads of downtime, you'll get loads of pictures." And I said to Murray, who by then had spent a fortune on this trip for a small piece in the NME, and he just said, "Yeah, if you want to do it, do it." So I said, "Okay, we'll stay for the weekend." And Ellen von Unsworth was just walking out the dressing room then, and I said to her, "Right, well, we'll see you tomorrow." And she said, "Why will you see me tomorrow?" And I said, "Because we're coming on the video set to do some shots to go with the piece." And she just stood up and screamed in my face, and she said, "Fuck you. Nobody takes pictures on my video shoot. I'm not making this video." And walked out of the dressing room. And I just thought, this is time to leave, really. It's now time to go home.
So luckily you had to take a bunch of wankers photographs. So any Duran Duran fans here at all? Or any Duran Duran here?
Bursting your bubble.
Yeah, they're horrible. So anybody got any questions off the floor at all? You might have to shout because I can't get the microphone all the way to you.
So you said that you helped with your whole goal with mandatory preachers was to sort of help create their image. I think they're like really one of the most appalling bands I ever heard of. I'm wondering if you're ever feeling guilty about the fact that you created an image for an artist that later you regretted.
No, I think because I like the Manics, and I've always really enjoyed working with them. So I like the trash aesthetic and all the thing, and you know, maybe there was a level of juvenilia in everything they were into, but they lived in Blackstock, you know, and they lived in Wales. Give them a break.
Is it important when you take a photograph of a band like that? You have to think about people like Wyndham as well, you know?
Cultural commentators who don't like the Manics. No, I just think, I thought, whether I like the music or not sometimes is irrelevant to whether I like the people. And I felt that I liked the things they were into, and I liked that kind of self-educated way that they would devour a lot of stuff and put it in their songs, you know. And maybe it was very fifth form, a lot of it, but my job wasn't to help them write their lyrics. My job was to make them look gorgeous on the cover of the paper.
Yes, it's not important, the music. Obviously music, it is important, but not to take a great photograph, is it? Because you're not portraying the music, you're just portraying the 3D visual image, in a sense,
Yeah, I agree, absolutely.
So he's just saying something, politely. Question
John,
there.
you've told me a nice story about Frank Sidebottom before, with Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
That would be great to
Does anyone know who Frank Sidebottom is in this room?
Yes.
Okay, well I photographed Frank Sidebottom.
Can you explain Frank Sidebottom to the people that don't?
Frank Sidebottom was a man, a kind of eccentric Mancunian called Chris Seavey, who would wear a grey suit and a papier-mâché head and would sing really terrible cover versions of people's songs with a peg on his nose. So he would sing Material Girl by Madonna and he'd go, I'm a material girl, and he'd sing like, and all his songs were like that, and he did Flash Gordon, Frank, aha, saviour of the universe. So that was his shtick, and he became a big cult figure in Manchester, and I photographed it. He was doing an EP called Frank Sidebottom Salutes the Magic of Freddie Mercury and Queen, and I did the pictures of him. And it wasn't quite working. He put a moustache on his papier-mâché head. And the shots were a bit stiff until we bought Queen's Greatest Hits, Killer Queen or something. I can't even remember what it was called. I've never listened to him before. And he was dancing around and we were getting some really funny shots. Anyway, we used one on the EP cover, and then about a year or so later, Freddie Mercury, I keep calling him Freddie Mercury, like Frank. Freddie Mercury, actually. Freddie Mercury was doing this album with Montserrat Caballé, and they were having a press conference at the Royal Opera House, and I was invited. And there was press from all over the world then, lots of TV cameras, and I thought, I'll take this and see what he thinks. So I took my Magic of Freddie Mercury and Queen EP, 2 copies, one to give him and one to get signed. And he couldn't refuse because all the TV cameras were on. And I said to him, have you heard it? And he just looked at it like it's a piece of shit and he said, yes. He said, some of it's funny and some of it's not.
It's just the idea that he'd actually bothered to listen to it. It's the weirdest thing.
I know, that's the bit I like.
I thought he was too busy having a wild, decadent time. You imagine like some big sort of 7-star party and sort of, do you want to listen to Frank Sidebottom?
There's Freddie Mercury with a massive cocaine party and he puts that on.
Another question? Come on, dare to ask. Oh, here's one right in front of us.
Well, I once read that Morrissey sent you like a postcard and asked you for giving him one of your pictures as big as possible.
Yes.
Is that really true? And does he really have like those old pictures? Or is it just something you imagine?
No, when I did the picture of Morrissey lying on the grass with his hands out, which was originally, it was shot for an NME cover. It was going to be the Smiths' first NME cover. And at the last minute, our feature editor had a change of heart and he put Big Country on the cover instead. Because he said the Smiths will never be big enough to be on the cover of the NME. Something he regretted for quite a long time. And then I got a postcard from Morrissey saying, that photograph moved me immensely. Would you send me a copy? So I sent him a 10 by 8, and he sent me another message saying, can you do a bigger picture? And so the biggest print I could actually make at the time was like 5 foot by 3 foot. And I said, but it's huge, is that what you want? And he said, yeah, that's perfect. So I had to have it delivered to him in a van. And then a couple of years later, when I was photographing him at his house, and he was showing me various pictures, and I talked to other photographers who said, he's bought a 5 foot by 3 foot picture of me too. And I just imagined Morrissey's bedroom to have a bed in it, and about 10 5 foot by 3 foot photos of himself all around him. But that's just my imagination.
Yes, that is far too ridiculous to believe to be true.
Who would believe Morrissey would do something like that?
Would you?
Everybody.
Yes. This side of the room's not asked any questions yet. Is there any questions? Lurking in the corner? Yes.
Would you ever turn anyone down if you didn't like their music? Does it have to be like music that you're
No, generally I've not worked with. There's lots of bands I wouldn't work with. And if I was doing a promotional shot for the band, you've really got to like their music. If you're doing an editorial shot, then it doesn't make it any difference. Although sometimes you think, do I really want to spend 4 days on tour with U2? Or Sting? And, the answer is no. But if it's editorial, sometimes you can get something out of it. There's always something enjoyable to be had there. And, I've photographed U2 quite a lot. I don't like their music, but I actually quite like them as people because they're quite preposterous.
Would you work with Duran Duran again?
They keep asking me.
Yeah, even after last time, yeah. You think they're going to apologise?
Yeah. We're back together. Do you want to come and see us?
Yeah, you can go me next.
Does it happen to you that you do shots that are being rejected by the editor or something for some reason or another, and then the next year around, when new shots are being made, those shots keep popping up instead of ones that are being
Well, it does happen quite often. I mean, I photograph actors as well, and I was photographing Javier Bardem, and I was told for the whole of Japan, and I was the only photographer allowed to do it. It was at the Dorchester, and I was told he will only be photographed in this room. You can't ask him to leave the room, and you've got 5 minutes. And he was doing a whole range of interviews for Japan to promote a movie. And I thought, well, that's not going to look any good. I wanted something quite dirty and urban for the picture. And I thought, when he arrived, I said, hello, I'm Cummins, blah, 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 we talked. And PR stood there and she said, you've got 4 minutes and 20 seconds left. And so I said to him, will you go outside, will you come into the corridor so I can take a photograph? And he said, yeah, of course. And they were trying to stop him. But I got him in the corridor and I just asked 2 people to walk up behind him so that they were in silhouette. And I photographed him under a light on the wall. And I printed it black and white and made it look like it was in an underpass in the city. And they absolutely loved the picture. And the day before, we'd done a huge session in Spain for a promotional session in a studio where we'd been photographed for 8 hours. And it cost about £40,000. And they dumped all that session and bought this one shot for me to use. So that was quite nice. But next time they'll give me 3 minutes. You can do it. You can do that in 5 minutes. Well, let's see what you can do in 3 minutes.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Have you ever worked with any bands that they can't, or any members of bands that cannot bear getting their photos taken, can't stand it, and if so, what's you do to relax?
Anybody who's in a band wants their photograph taken.
If I was in a band, I wouldn't. I should be in a band.
But that's why you're not in a band anymore.
And there are not people that are, that they cannot bear it, or they need some kind of props to make them more relaxed.
No, the props they need are usually cocaine, ecstasy, speed, alcohol. There's the bag, that's a bottle of Perrier in that. No, if you're in a band, you want your photograph taken. I'm sorry, unless you're Can or Noi or something, then you're not bothered. But if you're in a band, you dream of being, in those days, you dreamt of being on the cover of the NME.
It's probably half the band didn't want the picture taken. They're the ones hiding in the background. That's probably what happened to
The
me.
bass player and drummer, it doesn't matter. All you want is the guitarist and the singer. I did photograph an American band once where halfway through the session, the singer came up to me and he said, "Can you make sure you get the bass player on the edge of the pictures because we're sacking him at the end of the tour and we'd like to use these pictures for a bit longer." And I felt so sorry for this guy because he didn't know. And in the end, I said, "Can you just move a bit further back?"
Oh, who was that, Kevin? You can't say.
I can't say.
I know I can say.
Sorry, when you do editorials out of the shoots that you do, how many pictures do you give them as an option, or do you kind of decide yourself and then hope they go for it?
I usually pick the best 6 pictures from a session and give them those, and then they always use the weakest one, and you're always really annoyed that. So I got to a point where I think, right, well, we're going to put the best. I'll give you the best picture. That's the cover. Then I'll give you the other pictures for the feature. But that didn't work out, But
Do you work with digital cameras, or if yes, how do you like the transition to digital?
it made no difference really. The only difference it makes is it makes you. It makes you even more solitary. It makes it a more solitary profession. Because when you were shooting on film, you'd have to have the end of the film clip to look at the exposure and then have the rest of the film processed. So you'd go to the colour lab and you'd go to the pub next door and meet 20 other photographers who were doing the same thing. Whereas now you do a shoot and you just go home and sit in you study with your laptop and you never meet anybody. I think I'm talking so much.
Okay, any more? Yeah.
What happens when the band has a totally different idea about the photo shoot? Has that happened to you? And then what do you have in mind?
Well, you do their picture and then you do yours, and yours is always better.
Also, he hands 6 pictures over so you can see what's going to happen there.
Well, bands, if a band has a great idea, then I'm up for it. I'm happy if they do, because then I can work around it in my own way. But when bands say we want to be photographed in the pub or we want to be photographed at the bus stop, I think I've probably got a few better ideas.
Or a better bus stop.
Do you think I'd get a bus, mate?
I missed the first few minutes, so I apologise if you've already mentioned these 2 names, but Tim Burgess and Joe Strummer, any say about an experience with working with them? Good experience. Preferably, yeah.
It can be bad as well.
I haven't really got many stories about. I went on tour with the Clash once, and they were nice, but that's ceremony. They were nice, but I haven't really got any Clash stories. I just liked seeing them, and I went to see them a lot rather than photograph them a lot. And Tim again, I photographed the Charlatans a lot, and I did one picture in Montreal, and there was a bus parked on the street, a double-decker bus, and it said, "Who cares?" on the front. I think it was something to do with a bar nearby, and Tim put a dress on, like a wedding dress, which obviously had nothing to do with drugs at all, and stood in front of it with his arms outstretched. So he's cross-dressing and he's got "Who cares" above it. And I really wanted that on the cover of the NME, but we used a portrait of him, but we did actually use that inside.
Yeah, Google. Yeah, one more question.
Well, you talked about not really feeling fascinated anymore by today's bands, putting every single. What kind of sci-fi player putting every single shit on Instagram?
Yeah.
It's not really. Yeah. Is there anybody who really inspires you? Otherwise, it's pretty.
I think it's quite difficult when bands are younger than your kids. It's kind of hard. It's hard to, because you grow up with a certain kind of music, and your excitement comes from the music you liked in your teens, and then you're working with people who maybe are a similar age group, and then you get to a point where the bands are slightly younger than you, and then even more younger, and it's very difficult to work with very young musicians, because I don't have a lot in common with them. You know, I mean, I do if, like, when I photograph Savages, there's various bands I photograph. You've got Pins t-shirt on, I've photographed them quite a few times. And there are various bands I've photographed if I've been interested in them. But, to be honest, there's no money in it anyway. There's no money in photo. You know, much as you want to build an archive, there's no money in photographing younger bands these days, because there's no medium that's going to use those pictures anymore, and people just think they're free anyway. And that's not being cynical, that's just how it is. You know, why would somebody buy a picture of Pins from me when they can get a free picture of somebody in the band?
Well, that's sad.
We
We
have
have
an
one more
uplift-
question.
we have an uplifting end to it.
We might have an uplifting end. You might ask an uplifting question.
I just want to, with the bands that you photographed through the years, you seem to have this really tight symbiosis with them, in particular, let's say, Blue Order and Joy Division, where you almost gave them an image that they were thinking about themselves. So a very tight feedback loop almost. Is that possible anymore, do you think? Where the industries aren't that iconic these days?
No, I think it's impossible, because bands share too much. Like I said earlier, they give too much information away. And it's all about, I think rock and roll's about mythology. That's what we're trying to build, that's what we were always trying to build. And you can't mythologise somebody if he's sending you his video diary every day. It's really difficult. You know, I think once people get to... What we're like at the moment is we're like the new Victorians. When photography became a mass market product, once, you know, when it first started, it was for scientific use, and you'd get odd clergymen taking pictures and so on, and people having to stand there in a neck brace for 30 seconds to have a portrait taken. And then suddenly, smaller cameras, faster film, better chemicals, everything was cheaper, and the Victorians used to go out and take photographs of their street, of everything. They took pictures of everything that was happening. They documented it in a remarkable fashion. And then photography always was quite expensive on an amateur level, because it was always colour film, and people would take pictures on their holiday or on special occasions, and they wouldn't want to waste the film, and they'd get back from their holiday and find they had 6 frames left. So they'd take pictures of the dog in the back garden, and then they'd send it off to be processed. And now that you can shoot for the rest of your life on one memory card, and it's costing you nothing to do it, people are doing what the Victorians were doing, and they're photographing every second of their lives. And what they've got to realise is nobody's interested. Nobody, apart from that person, is interested in that stuff. You go to gigs and everybody's filming it, and not just filming it, they're then turning the camera around and filming themselves in front of the band. They're not watching the band, they're not enjoying the experience. They're more interested in making a documentary about themselves that nobody will ever watch.
We said it wouldn't get any more depressing.
I'll tell you a story about David Bowie and Björk at the end.
Okay. We'll get one more question, you could do that story.
Just a short one. If you were now the age that you were when you started to do pictures back then, do you think now you would still be a photographer, even maybe in another arena?
Yeah, definitely. It was what I wanted to study. It was all I wanted to do, and I'd probably still make it work for myself. But it's very difficult for kids leaving art school now to make a living from photography. But to be fair, when I started, it was very difficult for me to do it. You have to be very dedicated, and I think if you want to do it and you believe in yourself, then you have to work really hard and do it. I didn't just finish art school and go out and photograph David Bowie, and someone gave me £1 million and a load of cocaine. I didn't, you know, I had to go and photograph gigs in Manchester where I couldn't take, I've never been interested in drugs, but I never took drugs. I never had a drink, and I had to drive 10 miles after that gig to a dark room I used, stay up all night processing and printing it, put it on the train to London so someone could pick it up at 9 o'clock if they could remember I'd done it. And then if it went in the paper, I'd get £6.50 for that. I could have earned more money working in McDonald's, and I lost about £15 on every single job I did at the start of my career. So it wasn't easy, and it never is easy, and it's really easy for people to get disillusioned with it. But if you believe in yourself, then you will do it.
Can I? Thank you. In relation to the love of music, and also, as you said, people that were your peers and that you admired as musicians, and because, as you said, now there's no mythology and that has changed. I just wonder if you think you would still be doing music as photographing musicians now, or do you think if you were to start out now, maybe that wouldn't have interested you as much, even though it's probably hard to answer?
It's impossible to answer because I think that we live in a world of nostalgia now, where even young people are nostalgic for things they haven't experienced, and they love the bands that we grew up with. You know, obviously, and there's no underground scene.
Probably also because of the photography.
Well, maybe, but you know, there's all the elements are in place to give you something extra there, and you know, if you can sit at home and listen to Joy Division, or you can listen to something like that. Or you could go to a gig where a young band's playing, and admittedly, live music is really exciting, I think, most of the time. But you're having to watch it on 50 people's mobile phones, then it's frustrating.
So now, the final story about the ballet Björk.
I know, it's mainly about me, actually.
Something Bowie would say.
I really haven't told many people this, but I went, because we're in Berlin and you like Bowie here, but I was commissioned to photograph David Bowie for his 50th birthday, and I thought it was going to be some kind of private party, and that was it. Then I was told he was actually playing Madison Square Garden on his 50th birthday to 17,000 people. But I would then, so we went to the gig, and I was getting a session with him the next day. And I photographed him about half a dozen times anyway by then, so he kind of knew who I was and so on. And we were staying at the Soho Grand. And I was sat there having breakfast in a very small breakfast room, and David Bowie came down for breakfast, and there was nowhere for him to sit, and he recognised me. And he said, "Do you mind if I sit here?" This is when I found out he'd eaten moon dust for breakfast. And he came, and I said, "No," I thought, God, I'm going to have breakfast with David Bowie, that's the most exciting. Even though, you know, I'd got over all that initial stuff with him, I thought, I'm having breakfast with David Bowie. And he sat down, and just then, across the room, somebody waved, and I saw it was Björk, and I've worked with Björk an awful lot. And I thought, this is mad, this is just like being in Hollywood set. And Björk got up and walked over, and Bowie stood up kind of to brace himself and to give her a hug, and she completely ignored him and hugged me. And she said, "Oh, how are you, Kevin?" and blah, 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 gave me a kiss, and then she looked at him and she said, "Who is your friend?"
That's a good place to leave it, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kevin Robb.